Hello, everybody, and welcome to Lies and Statistics. So we're going to do a deep dive into the data-driven world of analysis. I'm Talia Lazarus, and I am a broadcaster and presenter. And what I'm going to do today, though, is I'm going to let all of you introduce yourselves, because what I want you to do when you intro yourself is I want you to also explain in your own ways, when you hear the term lies and statistics, what does that make you think and also feel? So straight over to you.
All right, starting it off, I'm Sam Eaton with Gemini Analytics. Our focus is on data processing, machine learning, artificial intelligence infrastructure, and how we can really grow and develop that, because ultimately I feel like this is a term that's used often, and I really key on that infrastructure word because I spent 12 years in Major League Baseball building analytics departments and saw that initially there's a big issue if you lose staff, if staff leaves, what do you do? A lot of times they take that industrial knowledge with them. So for us, it's important to build something that's very sustainable end-to-end towards actionable insights. And specific to the question, for me, I feel that statistics come down to taking as much as you can get, processing it, bringing it together, and then empowering users to truly understand what they're looking at. If you want to, for right or for wrong, you can make stats say whatever the heck you want. So having that industrial expertise to know the ins and outs of everything that you're looking at and how you want to action off of that is really the key.
Thank you.
I'm Brad Friedel. I'm with goalkeeper.com. I was an ex-goalkeeper for many years, and we're right now really the only data analytics company that concentrates and focuses and does goalkeepers only. If you think about it, 100% of the goals and shots against you, the goalkeeper faces. The best strikers in the world, whether you think it's Messi or Harry Kane or Ronaldo, they will only get up to about 30 to 30% of the actions toward the goal. The difference between your goal difference in the Premier League, I'll just go to there for it. It equates to about each goal is worth about £2.6 million as the finances in the game starts to grow. We can tell with the goal difference roughly what league position you're going to be in, and with the way the television contracts and bonus payments are marked out, it's a big difference whether you finish in 17th, obviously relegation 17th, or if you finish up in 5th position. And the goalkeepers, if you look at all the companies out there, no one distinguishes or differentiates between a shot from 40 yards out, let's say, that's at 6 miles an hour, or a shot from 7 yards out at 60 miles an hour. It's all just a shot. So we dive into each specific action a goalkeeper can and cannot make, or does not make. And we've seen some incredible growth over the last 12 months with analytics. Like you had said as well, analytics is not the whole story. There's also a human element to it. There's a mental situation with being a goalkeeper. Can you deal with the adversity of giving up bad goals, of media, social media, of course. However, the data side of things is an incredibly important part of the driving force between transfer fees, wages, what size club you can go to, and what part of the world.
Hi everyone, I'm Mark Nervegna. I work for Rayola Global Management, which is the technically commercial office servicing the core Rayola agency out of Monte Carlo. And I said, for me, the concept of statistics, I think, is becoming very fundamental also on the agency world, and because again, it's changing, and you have to be keeping up to date with everything, and we want to be informed and provide the athletes with informed representation, so that we empower them to be informed on anything that goes on during their careers, on and off the pitch. And again, going back also to the question about the lies concept, I think if you read newspapers, magazines, or even what the clubs sometimes tell you, we want to remove all that bias and be providing with something which is tangible and realistic for them that we can measure, and then of course mix with the experience that maybe the scouts or the agents have. We will have a full package for them to be fully informed, and we can provide the best advice for their career trajectory.
Hi, I'm Sayak. I'm the founder of Step Out. So Step Out is a sports performance analysis and digital ecosystem technology company. So here what we do is basically we enable the youth system with the advanced level statistics analysis. And when I hear lies and statistics, the one thing that comes to my mind is, for example, the interpretation of the data, the perspective that are being told, that are not being told, because say statistics is just a number, right? There's a lot of context around it. So often those contexts are as important as the data itself, and that's where we also come in. We use a lot of information design to make it very easy to understand, to very easy to interpret, so that the statistics, a specific number, how it's being represented, can be understood across the pyramid of sports development.
Thank you, everyone. And it is interesting as well because obviously it is, data and analysis and then the human element, of course. And that's something that we are going to touch upon in a moment or so. But I do want to just start, and I want to ask, whoever really wants to answer this in their own way is, the best teams are ones where collectively everybody does work in tandem with one another, from defense to attack, the whole team in general. And then the same obviously applies off the pitch. With such vast amounts of data and then technology available to all these clubs these days. So how can you ensure that the data and research that these clubs are using is being used effectively for the teams? Anyone that wants to take it?
I'll go first, and you can come in. With regards to the data, especially on the goalkeeper side of things, there's no one right way to see the data, because you could play, take Jurgen Klopp, he liked to press high, hold a high line. His goalkeeper needs to be very good at one-on-ones, and statistically, and our data and the analysis shows that, because Allison will deal with 60 one-on-ones a season, whereas if you're playing for Everton, you're in a lower block, and the goalkeeper, so Jordan Pickford, wouldn't have to necessarily be a goalkeeper that's good at one-on-ones. He might have to be better on crosses. He might be better even with his communication at times, because he has a lot of bodies in front of him, and maybe shots from distance. So it's a complete world of difference of why you would use the analytics. I think where people get it wrong is they hear the word data, analytics, stats, and they feel like clubs and teams are only using that, and that's something that can't be had. You can have a goalkeeper who's very good with his feet, but if you take him to the Bundesliga or take him to Italy, take him to Spain, take him to England, and that goalkeeper is 5'9", there's a likelihood that's not going to work out. So just because he's good with his feet, so you have to look through the full package, and I believe you touched on it at first. It's for us to give the clubs the opportunity to have the correct data, and then they use it to their own system and their own needs.
Thank you.
And building off that, I think through my experiences why I was excited to join Gemini Sports is part of it does come down to building an infrastructure. And specifically, there's so much data out there, as everybody here knows, there's so much information out there from scouting reports, evaluations. So you have the human piece, you have the data piece. And the key is, how can I bring it all together, and how can I get to actionable insights? I think, working in Major League Baseball, trying to solve that puzzle took us, with one organization, 5 years and a little over $1 million. And, so we made a lot of mistakes. We learned a lot from it. But the key is to engage all your stakeholders, to engage all the people who really should have insight to be a cohesive team. To build upon that, you have to have the structure in place to be able to ask the right questions, inform the right people, and make the right decisions.
Yeah, and I can take it from probably a different perspective, because we are actually users of the data ourselves at the agency level. Because again, if you look at what the agency asks us to do on a daily basis, actually to analyze potentially each and individual player, what are they good at, what are they bad at, and now, especially when you start prepping for the market, or if you're looking at potential talent that you want to go into, you really want to analyze also the clubs and understand where it could be a good fit for them in their current career trajectory, where they are. So we're looking at a lot of the impacts that maybe a player, if you place him in a club, would he be successful, would he be playing minutes, will he be growing, does he have a good synergy with whoever he has around him. So I said that's a message that we're trying to educate now also the clubs that we're going to speak to. Is like we want to show them a full picture of we driving the insights for them, analyzing the clubs, understanding what the potential challenges that they don't see. So coming up with a solution by presenting a player that actually makes sense for them. So that's why I think for us it's a fun challenge, and it's revolutionary if you think about it, because especially if you go back to what potentially Mino used to do, it was all about his knowledge, context, and who he believed in. Now we're adding this layer, so that would be a massive, complete picture.
I can add on to that, because majorly we work with a lot of youth teams and youth systems. And what we see, like majorly this data analysis has been limited to top tier for a while now. Whereas for a young athlete who is aspiring to be, say, the next Premier League star or next like global icon, they don't really have anything to target. So it's always like going out, training, and then just living up to the hope that I might be able to become that star that I want to be. So here at Step Out, what we also provide is certain benchmarks, certain context to the coaches also, because most of the cases in youth development, it's just verbal feedback that's the players are receiving, and to hold on to that and base their entire development on that, it's very difficult. It's very, I mean, oftentimes they don't really have any understanding whether they're on the right pathway or not. And also from the coach's perspective, majorly in the youth scenario, since technologies are limited, they often have to kind of remember a lot of stuff and then come back and write it down and then notes, etc., and then provide to the players. So I believe the context of the interpretation of the data is as much important as the data itself. So that's where I think it's a cohesive effort where a lot of people can come in together, utilize the data, and provide proper insights as per the context.
Because of course, then it's not just looking at the data for your club or the said club. It's also looking at the competition and looking at maybe the scouting process and who you might want moving forward. So then, is that something then? Do clubs use data in the negotiation terms when they're looking for new talent? And if so, kind of how would they do that in a way?
Again,
Yeah,
just
of
for
course.
anyone. They use with the goalkeepers. They will use the data in quite a few different arenas. So again, you go into the specifics of, do we need a shot stopper? Do we need a shot handler? We go into the specifics of both the shot, good at crosses, cutting out crosses, sweeping, and distribution. And the overall challenge when going into the clubs is to get them to understand that our data is not subjective. I use this term a lot. Is not that we like this player, so you must sign them. This is
More than a question is a curiosity. So I think one of the beautiful things about Stripe is that you
This
can
isn't us.
change.
Oh, I
the
thought my
way
voice
that
changed.
Social posting and all the social
This actually isn't us. But anyway, we'll keep going.
It was a nice voice.
people.
Yeah.
So one of the challenges that we have is sometimes you go into the room when they're going to use the data, they think it's us that are pushing these players to them, and it's not so much that, is we are, but because they're going to fit into that system, and we think they're going to fit into that club. I think you were touching on that. Not every player is going to be able to play at every club. Not every goalkeeper is going to fit into England. Not every goalkeeper is going to fit into Italy, Spain, etc. So we find a little bit of a challenge, but we love overcoming the challenge because we believe in our data, that we believe in what we do. That once they see the whole picture and what we can provide, we're pretty much on 100% success rate with what the teams and the clubs have seen from us.
Yeah, I can carry on that one, and I agree with all of that. And again, for us, is probably even we have to be extremely accurate and objective. I think the word objective is good because again, when we present a player to the club, now we're going extremely analytical. Also in the one pagers, potentially just to entice the interest of it or whoever we want to present. So, and it's every conversation with a club is different. You have maybe some clubs that are a little bit more analytical advanced, so they understand, they have their own processes. And that's probably the fun part because it's what we see, how we interpret the data, how we find the insights versus what they see in the data and what their objectives are for that player to come into within the squad or so on. So that's why it's important also to understand all the challenges and see potentially, okay, we have to be extremely objective to show that drive the insights. But again, every club that potentially we have seen through, some of them are a little bit more advanced, some are a little less advanced, some probably completely ignored. They're still very traditional in that term. So it's also how do you present it, how you present information, which can sometimes you have to be a little bit more in detail when you go to a little bit more analytical advanced clubs, and sometimes it's just a very simple one-pager will do, and ultimately it's just a part of the conversation. Then the agents will complete the rest of the tasks.
And building off that quickly, just because I do have prior club experience, what I think is exciting to your question is we are getting to the point now where with machine learning, with artificial intelligence, part of it is what a player did previously, but we're also looking from the club perspective to what do we project them to be. And that is It has objective roots to it because you are looking on based off of very clear statistics, but we do now have the ability, the technology, to push forward and say, what do we expect this player to be? Now, what's important to highlight, in my opinion, is you layer that with the evaluator's opinions. And ideally, there's alignment, because that makes it easy. You're very excited about a player, or you're very not interested in a player for your club. When there's misalignments, for me, that's when it gets fun. Because then you get in a room, the nerds, so to speak, argue with the scouts, the evaluators, you get back and forth, but ultimately that makes a stronger decision-making process. Because the beauty of the data is it allows you to start thinking, how will this player fit into our club, but also what do we expect them to be for the next 1, 3, 5 years? And that's where, for me, that's just the excitement of sport, very, very candidly.
Yeah, and I do believe like data plays a very important role in terms of understanding where a particular player is in the entire developmental curve, because not every player is developing at the same rate, right? So a player at an under 13 level or under 15 or under 18 level can have different developmental pace according to their own, say, their background, the coaching that they're receiving. So in this case, definitely like when a club is looking at a talent, data can help them not only understand the compatibility, but also understand how much they have reached their potential and how much more they can grow. So of course, it's a very exciting world where technologies are taking over, providing further context, further insights. So going ahead, let's see where it takes us.
Well, that's the thing. Technology is ever evolving. Data is obviously, growing in vast amounts, day by day, literally. And then I want to ask then, what is it like then with the amount of data and that it is ever growing, and for clubs as well, how do you handle such vast amounts of data and also though keep it so accurate? Because that's the thing that realistically at the end of the day, it's making sure that it's still accurate.
I can start with that one. In a nutshell, we are the first challengers to every insight that we see, every prediction, every insight that we try to find. We tend to always challenge each other before we even go out with something. And yes, you're right. The volume of data has probably been the biggest task of the time, most time-consuming that we had to go through, because I'm working with the providers, plus the first-party data that we collect directly. We wanted to have all mapping what we actually needed on a daily basis, because again, supporting the agency with their daily task is probably different from what the club will go and see, or potentially other providers will come and see. So for us, that has been probably the most lengthy task, and what we ended up doing is building a proprietary platform ourselves with a data warehouse, which is aligned directly, easy to get data from the providers with the various APIs. So now it's easy for us to handle those information. But again, we always try to vet and assess what each individual information is. Lengthy process, but we're very comfortable now with all this data that we have.
Yeah, I would say quickly, that's when I said about it took us 5 years and over $1 million to work on this process. It is big, because what happened, speaking to my prior experiences, we'd have statistical data in one place, evaluators in the other place, medical data, player tracking. There's so much information. So I think for like a pyramid, you need to build that foundation first. And that foundation is the warehouse or whatever platform you have to integrate, connect, map all this information. Because without that, you're very inefficient. You're going to it's going to be a poor decision-making process, in my opinion, solely because a lot of times the decision makers, the executives, will have imperfect information. So once you build that floor of the pyramid, then you can begin to layer on top of it and layer on top of it and have more and more insights and more analysis. But it's not an easy task.
Yeah, I mean, here at Step Out, we combine artificial intelligence with manual quality control to kind of streamline that process, because from a single match, you can generate so much data, and if that is inaccurate, then the decision making that is happening on top of that data is definitely going to lead to a wrong decision, and then who's to blame, right? So here we have a very detailed process where initially we have AI looking into the data, collecting it, and then we have a set of manual quality control process that ensures the data that is being generated and provided to the clubs, academies, players, coaches are of the highest accuracy.
I wish I could say that this is me inside the company doing this. I'd love to have like the athletic mind and the goalkeeping mind and then be an astrophysicist, but we're at 3 years into our program, and we have an astrophysicist that writes the algorithms, and we do and collect our own data from video feeds, and I'm going to say we. I'm up here. I'm going to say we've written these with these programs out. So they are what's taken the time from what he has told me is to collect all the data so you can have a baseline of Serie A, a baseline of Premier League, a baseline of Bundesliga, a baseline of all the leagues. Then you know where the average is for each of the goalkeepers, and then you know, then based on what he has written in, are they above the average or below the average? And then you can tell if they're above or below the average in each goalkeeping department of shot stopping, shot handling, sweeping, collecting crosses, etc. So we get to a point where it's very accurate. Where it becomes time consuming for us when you collect all this data is, as I mentioned earlier, every club or every federation is a little bit different with what they want. Some clubs want us to go over their youth market and see how their youth goalkeepers are stacking up against their senior goalkeepers. So then that's another piece of work that I thankfully don't have to go through and do, because it's another whole data collection scenario. So collecting the data, there's a lot of it, but it's fun. It really is fun when you get to when you're able to show them the data, especially when a club is a little bit iffy with it and they're not sure how to use it, and then you show them, they do it, and then they want more, and then they want more, and then they want to go into other areas, even into the youth market. And I'm originally from the United States, so you can imagine the size of the youth market that's over there, and it's mainly been amateur. So you can see you could probably tell some of the conversations we've started to have with some youth groups over there. So then you're talking millions of kids with data. Yeah.
And I guess there, the data is more important because players are getting picked, they're getting scholarships, a lot of things are happening, and if the information based on which these decisions are being made are inaccurate, then it's very difficult for these young and upcoming players.
And what's really exciting though now is, after you get through, like you were talking about, with machine learning, with AI now, we can get more and more insights out of this data. So I know the question was specific to bringing it in, compiling it safely, correctly, accurately, but the amount of information we can parse.
Yeah, and to carry on this, like, to go back to the point that which are the first challengers, and we're trying to change also the way that the agents and the scouts go about in identifying and analyzing the players. When we presented this data solution, this data idea that we wanted to bring within the agency, educating the scouts or say, like, okay, who do you think is a top talent in Italy or the Netherlands, because those are the two core markets. Okay, they give us a list. We run the same thing with the data, and again, maybe the first time we got maybe 40% of those top 15 that they believed in. Again, I'm talking probably 16 and above, anybody who played maybe in the youth leagues that we have good information on. They told us, okay, no, we actually look at this trait, we look at this trait, we look at this trait. So we were able actually to adapt the insights that they're telling us, and now we get to a point where we can identify maybe 80% that is what they actually believe is a top talent. And similar said now, we also with the already established players, similar concept, like, okay, how do we define what are the top traits for them to perform at the highest, what they need to go and be in. So again, by being able to do that, you have to have a massively clean data set, and you have to be quick to adapt and adjust it. So it's been fun.
Well, what's interesting as well is then for somebody that's not kind of involved in that side of things, and you're looking at your football club, or, you know, as a fan as well, you're looking at your football club, and you might think, oh, we might need a new striker or a new goalkeeper. You might just think, well, we want them because they're good. They stop shots, or they strike, they score a lot of goals. But then when you actually really think about it, yes, from what you see on the television or at a game, you can see if they're good or not. But actually, when you then think about the data side of things, there's a lot more behind the scenes, and it's actually looking at the data. And like we were talking about earlier, that's when clubs really can start to think, well, looking at the data, that's what we want in our transfer and those sorts of things. So,
I'll say, I think historically, most people in the room, if you're following football, the best goalkeeper in the league for that season has the most clean sheets or shutouts, depending on where you're from. And realistically, 54%, I think that's 54 is the number, of clean sheets results from a team defensive unit conceding the least amount of shots. So a shutout and a clean sheet is basically a team award. It's not just a single goalkeeper award. So if you go into the Premier League, a goalkeeper generally from Man City now or Arsenal now are going to have more clean sheets than a goalkeeper for Everton. However, Jordan Pickford had a good season this year for Everton. So there are analysis. Well, he had 18 days.
With the insight that we can morning about any of the players, try to go and verify that doesn't sound right. Or again, to give you a tangible example, Gigio Donnarumma, everybody says he's awful with his feet and stuff like that, but if you go and see within the top European leagues, who's the guy who has the most accurate passes, percentage of accurate passes, is actually Gigio Donnarumma, which again, it's okay, you have to interpret the information in different use cases or the type of passes that he does. But again, we can change probably the narrative or give a little bit of different insights if you dive into a little of the insights that you can get from the data, and that's something that we do pretty much every day.
Yeah, and I think like when decision making are being made for recruitment, so for example, we really need to have a scope for transitions, because it's not like a player playing in Syria having say 80-90% passing accuracy will clock the same thing when they go to another league, right? So for example, if we look at a really great goalkeeper, Thibaut Courtois, who came from like Chelsea to Real Madrid, and the entire world expected he's gonna do really great, but he didn't do in the first season. He needed a bit of time to kind of pick that up. So that's also another part where we can't just look at data and think that it's gonna get replicated even when the transition is happening. So of course we look into the data when we are making decisions, but we have to keep in mind there will be rooms for errors, there will be needed times for adjustment for transitions as well.
Yeah, and as I look at the title of this panel, Lies and Statistics, I think it's so interesting because we're at a point in time where technology is getting better and better. Major League Baseball has 23 terabytes of data a year on player tracking, just at the Major League level. Every single second, every player is being tracked 30 times. This is, some could say it's overkill, too much. Do we need that? Probably not. But what's interesting about it is I think society as a whole is being pushed from the traditional statistics we've known that we've believed in because that's what we could really quantify. Now we're starting to quantify newer, different, variable things. When you get to lies and statistics is because without the context, without the domain knowledge of a club, without the expertise of what's our style, what's our form, then you can get to some very poor decision-making processes. So it comes down to, it's exciting we have this technology, let's leverage it, let's use it, but then let's use it for us and let's customize it for us, what we need to do, what we want to do. I think that's the North Star for every organization, or it should be right now, because it's just more information that we can leverage and effectively utilize.
Then, as you were saying, so 54% of clean sheets are about, whether the goals are conceded or not. But the thing is, mistakes in the game happen. Mistakes happen all over the game. And I think what's interesting, I think you touched upon, is if a goalkeeper makes a mistake, everyone remembers that. But if a striker makes a mistake, well, they've got another shot at, hopefully scoring the next goal. And realistically, your team can still win 2-1 or 3-2, but you still let those goals in. So then does that mean, suddenly you're not one of the best goalkeepers statistically because you let the goals in, even if your team won? Or does it work like that?
No, I mean, if you do that on a weekly basis, then yeah, you're going to be down the bottom. I use someone who I think is a fantastic goalkeeper, one of the world's best right now, Emi Martinez. When he played against Liverpool, he let in a very uncharacteristic goal for him. Next game's man of the match. There's two things in goalkeeping, and we openly say this to the clubs when we're talking to them, that you can't put into data or statistics. One is, how do you monitor the communication of a goalkeeper? Because a lot of times communicating to your defenders can stop chances against you. Sometimes your positive communication can help players that have made mistakes in front of you, and there's no way to really put that into statistics. And the other one is, what happens when you make a mistake to your mental state as a goalkeeper? I played in a day, especially the first probably 3/4 of my career, where you would make a mistake on Saturday, it was in the Sunday paper, it was in the bin on Monday. No, unless you were the main game on match of the day, nobody really saw the bulk quantity of your mistake. So mentally, it was quite easy to not look at a newspaper on Sunday and get back to life and get back to training on, right after that. Nowadays, within seconds of that mistake going in, everybody is in the media. Everybody has a phone. It goes to social media. And a lot of the players, especially the young ones today, and you'll know this, it's very difficult to keep them off of social media. And then they go on there and they read about how bad they are and how bad their family is and something about their wife and their girlfriend, and it just goes down a rabbit hole. So you don't know with data analysis and statistics how a goalkeeper is going to do with that. So those are the two areas, but we have to be open with the clubs when we talk about that. So use a player I know very, very well. So Matt Turner, I coached him when he was in New England, and he came over to Arsenal, and I had spoken to him many times about when you make a mistake for Arsenal as opposed to New England Revolution and MLS, it's going to be a little bit different. And it wasn't. It's difficult. And for a goalkeeper, every goal that goes in against your team, when you're in there, you're involved in it. If you're the striker, you're standing at half field, you're not involved in that. You know, so it is that part of data and analysis is a different part of our company, actually. We try to help with the psychology of the goalkeeper, but those are the two areas that we can't bring analysis into yet. Maybe John, our guy that does it, he'll prove me wrong and he'll be able to decipher something. But right now, those are the two areas that we can't quantify.
Yeah.
I would just have to add very, very quickly on that, because what we did in baseball is we started to introduce that data, and it's imperfect. It's absolutely subjective, but with our mental skills departments trying to figure out, one, train our players to be able to handle adversity in different ways and learning how they handle adversity so we can more customize these messages to each player. But then we also selfishly turn that into data points, and then it comes back to integrating it in with the stats providers, everything else, to get a more holistic view of the player as a whole, and being able to map that information together ideally allows us to make more optimal decisions. It was imperfect, absolutely. It was very subjective, but I do think that because the media landscape is not changing anytime soon, I'm sure you deal with it often with players, and it's ruined careers, unfortunately. So being able to prepare them and establish them and work with them is such an integral part to the future.
Yeah, and that's why I said, like, using the goalkeeping example, if you've seen the whole season of, for example, Donnarumma, every game, and also because, again, he has that expectation of being one of the top goalies in the world. So every time he steps on the pitch, all the eyes are going to be on him. So when he plays Champions League, he plays national team. So again, looking at all the data, that's why we always try to find out all the different insights. When you go into the media in the morning, you see, oh yeah, but he made this massive mistake, or he cannot pass the ball and stuff like that. Let's look at the whole context. Let's look at the whole game, not at one single moment. And that's why potentially he's arguably one of the best goalkeepers in the world at the minute. So that's, again, having the data now, we're trying to educate a little bit more so the media, the fans, about the story or the actual insights that gives a little bit more of a complete picture of what happens on one occasion. That can happen. It's football.
Yeah, and I think like we also need to understand how much data we have to kind of make those predictions, because, so for example, when Google Maps tell you you'll reach a place in 20 minutes and you reach in like 21 minutes, Google is crunching so much data across the world. But when it comes to footballers, you're getting the ball maybe 5 or 6 times in a game, and throughout the season, like 30-40 games, it's like again 150, 200 amount of times you're touching the ball, playing a pass or receiving a shot. So in these cases, we don't really have that amount of data to kind of predict things as accurately as like the big data analytics industry does. So in this case, we definitely have certain limitations, but that is where we have to be very cautious, and we have to, whenever we say something in terms of prediction, we have to understand the limitations as well. That also needs to be in the context.
No, of course. And then when we were talking about psychology, you know, the psychology of players and human beings in general, and then you mix that in with something like social media and, you know, the human element of data, then as a player, you know, you've got the data, but then you're a human being, you've still got the human side, the psychology, and maybe what you might be reading online. So say you are in goal and you know that, you know, statistically, there's a player, you know, that you're faced with a penalty and they always usually score right. You know, they always go into the right corner, but then there's something about them, they're shifting a bit today, and they might not look like they're doing that. But you know statistically in the data you've been told that's what you need to do. Where does the human element come in, of the sense of like, I'm going to go with the data, or I'm going to go with my instincts and what I think I should be doing?
That's a great question, because right away I'm thinking of a penalty when at Old Trafford, Ruud van Nistelrooy, he took 5 penalties against me in my career. 4 of them went to the right. One I was fortunate to say, but he was a tremendous, tremendous player. One of them I dove so early to the right, he just rolled it, like trickled it into the left. All the stats said he was going to go to that side. He did. When it comes down to that, you also stats and analysis when it's into a game for a goalkeeper. If you make movements too early, the best players will expose it. So take Thierry Henry, for example. He put himself in a position on the right-hand side of the goalkeeper. You knew that he wanted to shoot to your left. He was so fast. He was much faster than almost every defender he played against. If you left and moved even a fraction of an inch to your left, he was going to score to the near post. So you had to stay there. He was so fast, you would get so close, and then you would tuck it into your left-hand side. You knew it was coming. Could you dive early? No. Could you lean? No. If you stayed there, is he going to score? Yes. It was one of those. So sometimes, like as a goalkeeper, you have to play the percentages, but statistically, you knew that when he got to that position, I don't know if it was 80% or 70, high 70%, he was going to go to your left-hand side. Sometimes there are other detections. I know Frank Lampard was a player when he hit a penalty. He had a different body shape if he was going to his right, to his left, and you knew this statistically. But your eye has to get trained also to react to it. But it's a whole host of things. Like as I said earlier, it's not just the data analytics, but you come in and you talk to the player, and if you get it wrong, that doesn't mean the stats were wrong or the data was wrong. In the moment type things, because you do also have to be true to yourself and believe in yourself and what you're going to try to do. And sometimes you just have to put your hand up and say, he's a pretty darn good striker that's coming up against you.
Well, I guess that's where the human element comes in, and we are obviously all human beings, so.
And I think on that, I always find it so interesting. I think as human beings, we love absolutes. Like, did you win, did you lose? Everything's binary, 0, 1. The reality is it's a lot of probabilities. So we're trying to find that human element, that piece to it. My style is I lean more towards the data itself. Not absolutely, but realizing if 80% of the time something's going to happen and 20% of the time another thing happens, I'll take that bet on 80%, unless I see something with my eyes, if I've been trained. We have advanced scouting, we called it. If there's something that I can identify, okay, then I'll make an action off that. But if it's an 80-20 probability, I'll play the probabilities. If I get beat, I can sleep at night. It's kind of how I think about it. And that's the difficult part, because when you bring in the media landscape and you bring in a lot of these things, and to fans it seems obvious, why did you do this instead of that? But the reality is very few things are absolute 100% going to happen. And it's our job to educate, to get deeper insights, to understand the odds. And if it doesn't go in your favor, at least you know why.
Yeah, in our case, what we have seen is data is often a double-edged sword, because in one side it gives you confidence, it gives you understanding, gives you a measurable output, whereas sometimes, as you mentioned, like 80% times it's happening, but 20% times it's not happening, right? So how we see it, like for example, in academics, like when we were going to school, say I'm getting 18 maths, I'm getting 17 physics, I'm getting 16 language, so I can understand what the gaps are, right? But in a traditional player development, that's not there. So all the players are getting the similar kind of developmental routine, and hence the developmental curve that the players are different. So that's where I think data can help a lot in terms of identifying aspects, because the other synonym of data is basically facts. So we are predicting things based on that facts, but we now need to concentrate more on the facts, because those facts are where we can understand, okay, here in this aspect my gap is little, in this aspect I have a bigger gap to fill, and accordingly the coaches can give me insights. And when I'm looking at facts, there's no conflict, right? I can see, okay, this is where I'm good at, this is where I'm bad at. It's not a matter of opinion. It's not a matter of verbal feedback. So I think definitely it helps, but yes, there are uncertainties that we need to cater to.
Yeah, and I said, like from our perspective, I said we will probably not speak directly to the coach about anything statistically related, because we already have the coaches, they have the clubs doing a lot of that for them. But where we can come in is actually educating the agents on what's happening in the market. If we see something when we watch video, or we see anything on the stats side, because the agents also play like a father figure to some of these players, so they have to help them be motivated, understand what what the media, what the fans say, and so on. So we tend sometimes to look at the global picture within the game, but we'll probably feed it more to the agents because they know how to speak to the players. So that comes where the mental element come in.
Amazing, thank you. And then we haven't got long left, so before I do ask you guys your final question, do we have any questions from the audience? Any at all? Yes?
Obviously, you're all working for different companies. Is there general classification in terms of how your data is collected or processed, which allows you to say to each other your data is identical, or does that complicate matters when it comes to buying or selling a particular player, where one guy says, I believe this data, but I don't believe your data, for example? So is there any standardization in the data collection?
We collect our data based on a video feed, a video feed that comes in, and then John has written the algorithms. There's no industry standard. There's no subjectivity to it. You know, if there's a shot from 16 yards out on the left at 35 miles per hour, like, we'll collect the data on the shot and it's to the right. And if the goalkeeper doesn't do well with catching or claiming or parrying the ball, you can't fake it, you can't dispute it. Like, we go right into the nooks and cranny of it. But we're the only company right now that does that for goalkeepers only. Companies for outfield players are very detailed and do a great job. But for goalkeepers, they've been left alone until now.
No. I feel across clubs, and please jump in if you disagree, I think every club's going to have different data in the sense of there are some common vendors that will share information that would be consistent across clubs, whether it's a StatsBomb, Second Spectrum, other large vendors like that, you know, vendors throughout the leagues. But when I hear data, I also think about the proprietary data within the club, which is scouting reports, evaluations. Can you integrate that using machine learning, AI, large language models to get sentiment analysis? So we can see what's going on with the stats, the data that vendors provide to all clubs, but then what do our experts see as well? So I personally view that as data, which would be very different across clubs. So you speak to 3 clubs and they have very different perceptions of a single player, even though maybe 70, 80% of their data is identical, but that other 20% makes a difference.
Yeah, very true, because there are definitely certain gray areas in those definitions, right? Even when there's a tackle and the entire fans are debating whether it's a penalty or not, there are definitely certain gray areas. For example, if it's a ground duel or it's a standing tackle. So we definitely need to establish fine lines. So the definitions, as you asked, can be consistent across like any provider, any analysis company.
I'm a user of the platform, so. But to go back to the point, like, it's a lot of due diligence that we went through to identify the providers that we wanted to work with, and where we wanted to develop our own way to interpret the data to match our needs. So again, standardizing, but again, just an example of expected goals. Expected goals, the models that to build those are different from a lot of the providers that we found. But ultimately, if you put everything together, we identified something that's like this. We can build on this and identify all the potential stuff. So we're expanding on it.
And then that goes, like, goalkeeping's a more specific niche in the market. Like I said, like, if you throw a fastball, it's 98 miles an hour. You can't, another analytics provider is not saying it's 92, it's 98. You know, and that's, goalkeeping's a little bit more standardized than what happens in a tackle. Is it a foul? Isn't it a foul? A pass, 20-yard pass. You know, is that a short pass? Is that a medium pass? The providers will dictate a little bit of differences in that. Goalkeeping's a little bit more standardized on shot to shot, crosses across, etc.
Perfect, thank you for your question. So then I want to wrap up with one more question for you guys. And I want to ask then, with AI and, you know, ever-evolving, technology ever-evolving, and then data ever-evolving, how do you feel that this is going to impact moving forward in the football world?
I can start with that one. I strongly believe in it, and I think it will make our lives much easier, and we can be much more efficient. I'm not going to lie that we're looking into integrating AI as well, but again, it's not going to happen overnight, and the accuracy of it is not going to be perfect at the beginning. That's why, again, the idea of building proprietary data warehouse comes a lot for that. Not only on analyzing or writing a quick report to just a quick assessment that you can give maybe to the scouts or to the agents, or identification of a player. I think the scouts and the agents will always have a stronger opinion than an AI bot or whatever you can do. But it will definitely give us a different perspective, or can maybe look at some information. But not only that, but maybe also in reviewing contracts or reviewing stuff like that. So it will make it quicker, I will say. So maybe potentially even more efficient, but I will review it a lot.
Yeah, I think over the last decade, the amount of data in sports has increased by about 150 times. And it's going to keep happening as technology improves, you're tracking more players, more is coming in. Human beings, we have our limitations, and that's where AI is really exciting. It's something we leverage openly and often. Is it going to be perfect every time? Absolutely not. There's no question about that. But the reality is the data is growing so fast, you need to leverage the technology to bring it in and to really start understanding and getting, again, actionable insights out of that information.
I think eventually clubs that aren't using data going forward are going to be left behind slowly but surely. In the goalkeeping world, it's going to help people save money on transfer fees. It's going to be able to help be able to really fit the correct salaries for your goalkeepers, rank 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. in your club. And it's going to be able to, when you're at a smaller club, know the transfer value to a larger club. And it's just going to keep getting more complex, bigger, better, faster, stronger. And my suggestion is you better keep up with it.
Yeah, definitely. And the one thing AI is doing, as Mark said, it's making people more efficient. The things that we used to do in like 3-4 days, we can do now in like 3 hours. And that's where the first impact is coming in. So for example, here at Step Out, we previously, whereas coaches has to spend like hours and hours just finding a particular instance, now using AI, we can just automate that. So it's for them, it's much more efficient work done in less amount of time, and hence the majority of that insight can be implemented now for developing players, enhancing their experiences. It's a fast-growing world. Technology is growing at an immensely fast rate, and it's an exciting future ahead of us.
Of course, it's exciting, and like you said, everyone's got to keep up. So have you guys got any last remarks, anything to say? No?
No.
Well, thank you very much, my panel, and thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.